In a small village, there lived a farmer named Joe. He wore old, faded overalls and a wide straw hat. His clothes were rough and his hands were strong from years of hard work in the fields. Joe was quiet and humble. He woke up early every day and worked late into the evening, caring for his land and animals. The village was full of people who liked to talk. They liked to judge others by how they looked. When Joe walked through the town square, many of them laughed and whispered. "Look at that farmer in his dirty overalls," they said. "He has no money, no style, no future." But Joe did not answer. He kept his head low and smiled softly. He knew their words were harsh, but he did not let the teasing hurt him. He had a secret that no one knew. Every morning after feeding his chickens and cows, Joe would sit on his small wooden porch with a worn notebook. In that notebook, he wrote plans and ideas. He dreamed of a better life, not just for himself, but for the whole village. The people laughed at Joe's dreams, too. "A farmer dreaming of change," they said. "He will stay poor and stuck forever." But Joe's eyes shone with hope. He believed in hard work and patience. "One day," he whispered to himself, "they will see." One bright morning, the village was busy preparing for the weekly market. Stalls were set up and the air smelled of fresh bread and ripe fruit. Joe arrived with a small basket of fresh eggs and vegetables from his farm. As Joe walked past the stalls, a group of young men stopped him. They pointed at his overalls and laughed loudly. "Hey, Farmer Joe, did you bring your overalls to sell today?" one of them joked. The others joined in, making fun of his clothes and his simple life. Some villagers looked away, embarrassed. Others just watched quietly. Joe's cheeks burned, but he stayed calm. He smiled and said, "Good morning, friends. Would you like to try some fresh eggs? They are from my own chickens." No one answered. They only laughed harder. At the edge of the market, an old woman watched Joe. Her name was Mrs. Carter, and she had lived in the village for many years. Unlike the others, she saw something special in Joe. She remembered when Joe first came to the village years ago. "He's a good man," she told a young girl nearby. "Don't judge him by his clothes." Joe noticed Mrs. Carter's kind eyes and felt a small warmth inside. He thanked her with a nod and kept moving. That day, after the market closed, Joe went back to his farm. The sun was setting, painting the sky with orange and pink colors. He sat under an old oak tree and opened his notebook. He had been saving money for years, a little bit at a time from the eggs and vegetables he sold. But Joe was not saving for himself. He had a plan to help the village grow. Joe's farm was small, but he believed it could be the start of something bigger. He wanted to build a place where farmers could work together, share tools, and sell their goods easily. He dreamed of a future where no one would laugh at hard work or simple clothes. That evening, Joe's neighbor Tom came by. Tom was a tall man with a big smile. He had laughed at Joe many times, but tonight he looked serious. "Joe," Tom said quietly, "I heard you have a plan for the village. Is it true?" Joe looked at Tom and nodded. "Yes, I do. But it will take time. And I need help." Tom thought for a moment. "I want to help. The others may laugh, but I believe in you." Joe smiled wider than before. For the first time, he felt that maybe, just maybe, things could change. Meanwhile, back in the village, the gossip continued. The rich store owner, Mr. Barnes, heard about Joe's plans. He laughed loudly in his big house. "A farmer with dreams? What a joke," he said to his wife. "He doesn't know anything about money or business." But Mrs. Barnes looked worried. "Maybe we should watch him," she said. "If he really has money, it could be a problem." Days passed. Joe worked, harder than ever. He fixed old fences, planted new seeds, and talked to other farmers about his ideas. But every time he went into town, the laughter followed him. One afternoon, as Joe was fixing his roof, a group of boys threw stones at his chickens. Joe stopped and looked at them quietly. "Why do you do this?" he asked softly. One boy sneered, "Because you're nothing. Just a poor farmer." Joe didn't yell or fight back. Instead, he said, "I may be poor now, but I have a plan. One day I will help everyone here." The boys laughed and ran away, but Joe stood tall, feeling stronger, inside. That night, Joe sat by the fire in his small kitchen. He looked at the letter he had received that morning. It was from a bank in the city. "Your loan application is approved," the letter said. Joe's heart raced. This loan would give him the money to start his big plan. He looked out the window at the sleeping village. Tomorrow, everything would change. The next morning, Joe woke up before the sun. The sky was still dark, but he felt a spark of hope inside. Today was the day his plan would start to take shape. He walked to the small kitchen table and opened the letter from the bank again. The loan was real. He had money to invest in his farm and in his dream. Joe didn't want to tell anyone yet. The villagers still laughed at him. They did not know about his past or the hard work he had done to save this money. Years ago, Joe was not a farmer. He lived in a big city and worked as a businessman. He wore suits and went to meetings in tall buildings. But one day, everything changed. A bad deal cost him his job and money. Joe lost almost everything he owned. Instead of giving up, he decided to leave the city and start over in the village where his family had once lived. He learned how to farm and worked hard every day. It was not easy. Many days he felt tired and alone. But he never stopped dreaming. Joe had been saving money slowly from selling eggs, vegetables, and small things from his farm. He did not spend on new clothes or fancy things. Every penny was for the future. Now, with the loan money, Joe could make his dream real. He spent the morning walking through the village, thinking about his plan. He wanted to build a community farm, a place where all farmers could work together. They could share tools, buy seeds in bulk, and sell their produce in one market. This would help the small farmers make more money and help the village grow. But Joe knew it would not be easy. Many villagers were afraid of change. Some did not, like him. They laughed at his old clothes and simple ways. Later, Joe visited the town hall. He wanted to talk to the village leaders about his idea. The hall was empty except for Mr. Barnes, the rich store owner. Mr. Barnes smiled coldly when he saw Joe. "So, Farmer Joe thinks he can change the village?" he said loudly. Joe did not answer right away. He looked Mr. Barnes in the eye and said, "I want to help everyone, not just myself." Mr. Barnes laughed. "This village is mine. Your money won't change that." Joe left quietly, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. But he did not give up. He knew the real power was not money alone. It was trust and hard work. On his way home, Joe met Mrs. Carter, the old woman who always believed in him. "Don't listen to them," she said kindly. "They only see what they want to see. You have something special." Joe smiled. "Thank you, Mrs. Carter. I will keep going." That afternoon, Joe called his old friend Sam. Sam was an expert in farming machines and had helped many farmers before. "Sam, I have a plan," Joe said on the phone. "I need your help to bring new machines to the village. It will make work easier for everyone." Sam was excited. "Joe, I will come next week. We will make this happen." Joe felt hope again. He was not alone. Meanwhile, the village was full of whispers. The news about Joe's loan and plans spread quickly. Some villagers were curious, but many still laughed. "Who does he think he is?" one man said. "A poor farmer with a checkbook? He will fail." But others watched quietly. They wondered if Joe was the key to a better future. That night, Joe sat by the fire looking at his worn notebook. He wrote down new ideas and made a sako list of what he needed. He knew there would be hard days ahead. People might still laugh, and money might run out. But Joe's heart was strong. "Change is coming," he whispered. The next morning, Joe woke with a sense of purpose. Today was important. He had arranged a meeting with the other farmers in the village. He wanted to share his plan with them. Joe walked slowly through the village, carrying his worn notebook and a small bag with some fresh vegetables. The sun was warm, but the air felt tense. Joe knew many farmers were afraid of change. When he reached the village center, a small group of farmers had already gathered. Some looked curious, but others had hard faces. They remembered Joe as just the quiet man in overalls, not a leader. Joe took a deep breath and began. Friends, I know many of you think I am just a simple farmer, but I have an idea that can help us all. I want to build a community farm where we can share tools and sell our goods together. It will save us money and time. Some farmers nodded slowly. Others looked doubtful. One older man spoke up. Joe, this sounds good, but where will the money come from? And who will manage it? We've tried things like this before, and they failed. Joe smiled softly. I have some money saved, and the bank gave me a loan. But I cannot do this alone. I want us to work together, share the responsibility, and help each other. The farmers looked at each other. The silence was heavy. Suddenly, a young man laughed loudly. Why should we trust Joe? He's not rich. He wears old clothes. He's just a dreamer. Some farmers chuckled. Joe felt a sharp pain in his chest, but he stayed calm. Maybe I am a dreamer, Joe said quietly. But dreams can become real if we work hard. I believe in us. After the meeting, many farmers went home without saying much. Joe felt a mix of hope and doubt. The next morning, Joe woke early with a strong feeling. Something was about to change. He walked outside to check his farm. The sun was shining and the birds sang loudly. But Joe's mind was full of worries. He knew Mr. Barnes and his men would not stop easily. They wanted to control the village and keep the farmers weak. Joe needed more support. He decided to talk to the village council and ask for their help. At the council meeting, Joe stood before the leaders. His heart beat fast, but his voice was steady. Friends, I want to help this village grow. My plan can give us all a better life. But I cannot do it alone. I need your support. The council members looked at each other, some curious, some doubtful. One woman spoke. Joe, your idea is brave. But what if it fails? The village will lose money and trust. Joe nodded. I understand, but we must try. If we stay the same, nothing will change. A man asked, Who will manage the community farm? How will we share the profits? Joe replied, We will form a group. Everyone who works will have a say. Profits will be shared fairly. The room grew quiet. Then, to Joe's surprise, the village mayor said, Joe, your plan has merit. I will support you. Others nodded slowly. The tide was turning. Feeling hopeful, Joe returned to his farm. He called the farmers who had come before. Mrs. Green, Sam, and a few others met him. We have the mayor's support, Joe said. Now, we must work harder. The group began cleaning the barn, fixing fences, and planting new crops together. More farmers started to join. They saw Joe's passion and wanted to be part of the change. But Mr. Barnes was angry. He watched from his store window as Joe's group grew stronger. One evening, Mr. Barnes sent a letter to the village council. It was full of lies and warnings about Joe's plan. He said Joe was dangerous and would ruin the village. The council was confused. Some leaders worried. Joe knew he had to act fast. The next day, Joe called a meeting with all the villagers in the town square. He stood on a small stage and spoke loudly so everyone could hear. My friends, some people want to stop us with lies, but we must stay united. Our dream is bigger than fear. People listened quietly. Some faces showed hope, others showed doubt. Joe looked around and saw many young farmers ready to fight for the future. We will prove them wrong. Together we will build a better village. The crowd started to clap. Slowly more people joined in. That night, Joe's farm was full of energy. The community farm was no longer just a dream. It was real. The old barn had new tools and seeds. The tractor was ready. Joe felt proud, but knew the hardest work was still ahead. Outside, the stars shone bright. The village was changing, and Joe was at the center. His quiet dream was becoming a powerful reality. The sun was still rising when Joe stepped outside. His farm was full of movement. Farmers were working together, planting seeds and repairing. Old tools. The community farm had become the heart of the village. Joe smiled. For the first time in years, there was hope. People were believing in themselves again, but deep inside, Joe knew something wasn't right. Mr. Barnes had been too quiet. And when powerful people go silent, it usually means trouble. That afternoon, trouble came. Joe was showing two young farmers how to use the new watering system when Sam came running, out of breath. "Joe, you need to come now. There's a problem at the barn." Joe dropped everything and ran. When he reached the barn, his heart sank. The doors were broken, tools were stolen, seeds were scattered all over the floor. The small tractor had been smashed. Farmers stood in shock, staring at the mess. "Who would do this?" someone whispered. Joe already knew the answer. "Mr. Barnes." He didn't say it out loud. He didn't want fear to spread. Joe bent down, picked up a broken handle, and said calmly, "We'll fix this. We'll clean it up and start again." Some farmers looked unsure. "But Joe, what if they come back? What if it gets worse?" Joe stood up. His voice was firm. "That's what they want. To scare us. If we stop now, they win." News of the attack spread across the village. People were angry. Even those who didn't support Joe at first began to speak up. Mrs. Green walked to the village store and faced Mr. Barnes. "This has gone too far," she said. "You're destroying the spirit of the village." Mr. Barnes gave a cold smile. "It's just business. He's getting in the way." Mrs. Green looked him in the eye. "Joe's not just a farmer. He's a leader now, and you're afraid of that." That night, Joe sat alone in the dark barn. He stared at the broken tools and damaged tractor. For the first time in a long time, he felt tired. He wondered if he had made a mistake. Just then, he heard a soft voice. "You're not alone, Joe." It was Sam. Behind him stood a line of villagers, men, women, and even children. They carried bags of nails, hammers, seeds, food, and even a small lantern. One by one, they entered the barn and began to clean, fix, and rebuild. No one said much, but their actions spoke louder than words. Joe's eyes filled with tears. This was more than farming. This was family. By sunrise, the barn looked new again. The walls were strong, the floor was clean, and outside, new seeds were ready to be planted. The village had sent a message to Mr. Barnes without saying a word. "We're not backing down." Later that day, Joe met with the village mayor. "I'm sorry, Joe," the mayor said. "We should have protected your farm. We'll do better. From now on, the community farm will be under village protection." Joe nodded, his heart full. The dream was still alive, even stronger than before. But Mr. Barnes was not done yet. From behind his desk, he picked up his phone and made a call. "If they won't break, then I'll destroy him in front of everyone," he said coldly. "I'll expose the farmer for what he really is." The news spread fast. Mr. Barnes had called for a public meeting. He said he had something important to reveal about Joe. Flyers were posted all over the village. Some read, "Come see the truth about Joe the farmer." What is he hiding? This Saturday, Town Hall, 5 p.m. Joe saw the flyer and felt a chill. He knew Barnes was planning something, but he didn't know what. The villagers were nervous. Some whispered rumors. Did Joe steal something? Maybe he lied about his money. What if he's not really helping us? Joe said nothing. He just kept working. but inside he was hurting. He had given everything, his time, his money, his heart, and now people were doubting him. Sam came to him and said, "You should speak at the meeting too." Joe shook his head. "Let him say what he wants. The truth will stand." Saturday came. The town hall was full. People packed every seat. Even those who had never supported Joe came to watch. Mr. Barnes stood tall at the front, wearing a dark suit and a proud smile. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "Today I will show you who Joe really is." He held up a folder full of papers. "This farmer," he said loudly, "has no business experience. He has no official training. He never finished school." Gasps filled the room. Mr. Barnes pointed at Joe. "He's tricking you all. He wants to play the hero, but he's just a poor man pretending to be a leader." Joe stood quietly in the back. His face was calm, but his eyes were heavy. Mr. Barnes continued. "He's putting your money at risk. He's dangerous to the village. Economy. You trust a man in overalls instead of someone who knows real business?" Silence followed. Then Joe slowly walked to the front. He stood on the stage, just a few feet from Mr. Barnes. He didn't shout. He didn't hold papers. He just spoke from the heart. "Yes, I never went to business school. I worked in fields since I was a child. I never wore a suit like Mr. Barnes." He looked at the crowd. "But I know what it means to be hungry. I know what it means to watch your crops fail, and I know how it feels to help someone, even when you have nothing." People listened closely. "You say I don't have training," Joe said, turning to Barnes. "But look at the barn we rebuilt. Look at the seeds growing again. That's real work. That's real leadership." The villagers began to nod. "I didn't do it alone," Joe added. "The village did it together. This is not about me, it's about us." Mrs. Green stood up. "He helped me when my husband died. He brought life back to my land." Another man stood. "He taught my son to plant crops for free." One by one, villagers stood and spoke. Even the mayor stood up. "Joe may not wear a suit, but he has done more for this village than any of us." Mr. Barnes looked around. His face turned pale. The room that had once feared him now stood with the man he mocked. Joe looked him in the eye and said quietly, "You tried to break us with lies, but you only made us stronger." Mr. Barnes picked up his papers and walked out of the hall, his shoulders down. No one followed him. Joe stood alone on the stage, but he didn't feel alone anymore. The entire room clapped for him. He had won. Not with money, not with power, but with truth, kindness, and unity. That night, the village celebrated. Music played, farmers laughed, children danced in the fields. And Joe, he just smiled. The hardest days were behind him, but one last surprise still waited, something no one expected. The village was full of joy after the town hall meeting. Joe had stood tall against Mr. Barnes, and the people stood with him. His quiet strength had touched every heart, but Joe wasn't done yet. He had one final plan, and it would leave the entire town speechless. A week later, a large business fair was held in the city nearby. Businessmen, company owners, and rich investors came from across the region. The village mayor invited Joe to go with him and represent the farmers. At first, Joe said no. He didn't like big crowds. He felt more comfortable in the soil than in suits. But Sam encouraged him. "You don't have to be like them," Sam said. "You just have to be you." So Joe went. He wore clean jeans, a simple buttoned shirt, and his old farmer hat. As always, he carried his notebook, full of farm plans, hand-drawn charts, and ideas for the village. At the fair, Joe walked through rows of big company booths. People in shiny suits looked at him and whispered, "Who let a farmer in here? Did he take a wrong turn? He looks like he sells potatoes, not businesses." Joe ignored them. He walked calmly, observing everything. Then came the loud voice of the event host. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for our business pitch contest. The winner gets a full investment and a publishing deal. Joe stood in the back, listening. The host continued. If anyone thinks they have a big idea, come up now and show us. Joe didn't move. Then the mayor nudged him. This is your chance. Joe slowly walked toward the stage. Laughter echoed across the room. Is he lost? Maybe he thinks it's a farmer's market. Joe stood on the stage. The host raised an eyebrow. And you are? Joe Miller, he said simply. I'm a farmer. More laughter. But Joe remained calm. He opened his notebook and began to speak. I know I don't look like a businessman, Joe began. But I've built something with my hands. My village had nothing. Just broken tools and broken hope. He showed pictures of the ruined barn, then pictures of the same barn rebuilt. He showed a simple map of the farm he designed with shared land, community work, and zero waste. Then he pulled out a page of numbers. We started with only $600, but now, after 6 months, we've made 5 times that. And more than that, we've created food security, jobs, and peace. The room went quiet. Joe continued. I'm not asking for money. I'm offering a plan, a real one. If we support local farmers in villages across the country, we can change lives. He looked at the judges. I don't sell dreams. I grow them. The room was silent. Then someone stood and clapped. Another followed. And soon the whole room was on their feet. Joe stepped off the stage, his heart pounding. He didn't expect to win. He just wanted to be heard. But something amazing happened. The host walked up to him and said, Joe, I've seen a lot of pitches, but yours had more heart than any of them. You're the winner. Joe's eyes widened. And, the host added, there's one more surprise. A rich investor stepped forward with a smile. I saw your barn photos, he said. They reminded me of my grandfather's farm. I want to help. Name your number. Joe paused, then pulled a folded checkbook from his back pocket. He looked at the investor and said, I don't want the money for myself. I want you to write the check in the name of the Village Farm Trust. The host blinked. You already had a checkbook? Joe smiled. Sometimes people only respect what they can see. But value doesn't come from clothes or titles. It comes from what you build. Back in the village, everyone waited for Joe's return. When they saw him walking down the road with a smile and the check in his hand, they knew something big had happened. Tears ran down faces. Children ran to hug him. That evening, under the warm sky, Joe stood before the village. We started as a forgotten place, he said. But now, we've been seen, and it's only the beginning. Joe never changed his clothes. He never left the farm. But now, he had something more powerful than money, respect. And it all started when a man in overalls dared to dream.